Good evening and welcome to the Literaturhaus Berlin. My name is Sonja Longolius and I welcome you all here at the main hall at Literaturhaus Berlin. It's very difficult these days to talk about the terrible and the horrible, and yet it is very important that we talk about this, especially today. And I'm very honored to have Yassin al-Haj Saleh today here at the Literaturhaus Berlin, because he has written an amazing, an astonishing, a shocking, but a very important essay on this topic. The English title is The Representation of the Terrible, Attempt about the Destroyed Syria. Its German translation will come into the bookshops on November 2nd. It is wonderfully translated by Günther Ort, who is also here with us tonight. Thank you and hello. And its title in German is Darstellung des schrecklichen Versuch über das zerstörte Syrien. And I would recommend all of you to read this important essay, but you will read it anyhow after this evening. I'm also very honored that Susan Neiman is here. She's a philosopher. You know her also as the director of the Einstein Forum. And, you're well known on our stage as well. You have been here before. And Eva Menasse is here. She's a writer herself. She's also the board member and the board, what is Vorsitzender in English? Huh?
I'm the spokesperson. I'm the
She's
spokesperson.
The spokesperson of the PEN Berlin, and also well known and a guest here in our house. So I'm very happy to have all of these three important thinkers here with us tonight. And I want to thank PEN Berlin for this evening, because this is a cooperation between PEN Berlin and the Literaturhaus Berlin. So, the stage is yours, and I wish you all, an interesting and an eye-opening evening. Please, Eva.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sonja. I welcome you all on behalf of PEN Berlin, and PEN Berlin is very grateful to the Literaturhaus Berlin. We founded our new Writers Association right here 15 months ago, and we are already received as a member in the Dachverband. What is this in English? Yeah.
International organization.
The PEN International organization. This is an evening that is very important to me personally, since I met Yassin last year in Uppsala at the annual meeting of PEN International in this little village in the town, let's call them town, in Sweden. Yassin al-Haj Saleh is one of the most renowned intellectuals of his country. As Sonja already told you, he's writing and commenting in international English and Arabic-speaking media. Some of his books, I figured out on your website, are also available in French. I don't know much about other languages. His book, The Impossible Revolution, is already a standard work on the situation in his tormented home country, Syria. There were 2 documentations made on him and his flight in 2013. He just told us before that the one he does not like that much. So we are not going to go on this longer.
This was supposed to be a secret.
Yeah, a secret. So, but there are 2, and one he likes, the other he doesn't. So, only one of stays a miracle. Only one of Yassin's books was so far translated into German. The title is Freiheit, Heimat, Gefängnis, Exil und die Welt. It's also his publishing house Mattes and Seit. And his new book, Sonja mentioned it, Darstellung des Schrecklichen, Representation of the Terrible, was supposed to be here today, or we were hoping for it, but unfortunately, apparently printing is not finished. But go and get it when it will be out on November 2nd. And also available, accessible for German speakers are, of course, his letters to Samira, to his beloved wife that has been abducted in Syria more than 10 years ago and is disappeared ever since. These letters are available in German, translated on the website of the Heinrich Böll Stiftung. And I want to highly recommend them to you, not only because of the really tragic personal story of this couple, but because Yassin is also there analyzing and explaining the situation in Syria. As I said, I first met Yassin at this PEN meeting last year in Sweden. Back then, 1 year ago, he told me about his upcoming 2 books on Syria and that he was trying to look onto this horrible and ongoing conflict through the eyes of Hannah Arendt. This is why our evening today is called Hannah Arendt in Syria. To me, this all of a sudden made perfect sense how she, on the one hand, captured the Eichmann trial and invented this famous expression of the banality of the evil, and on the other hand, described in the origins of totalitarianism the elaborate system of terror and torture that very soon is not questioned anymore by ordinary people. Both these perspectives seem to apply to Syria, according to Yassin. For us in PEN Berlin, as an organization that wants to support writers in German exile, it's sometimes difficult to generate interest or the appropriate framing for the subjects and texts of our colleagues. In this case, I think the combination is striking. While the German public seems to have forgotten about Syria and considers it mainly as another of these problems down there, Yassin directly takes his start from the German guilt and German burden, the National Socialism and its unprecedented crimes, and tries to compare all this with the Assad regime in Syria that is in power now for so many decades. In Yassin's book, one is immediately caught by lines like, "Some Syrians have been in prison longer than the National Socialists have been in power." This sentence applies to himself as well. I'm very happy and honored that my friend Susan Neiman agreed to take part in this evening because I thought from the very first moment that she would be the perfect match for an intellectual, philosophical, and political discussion. They were already going on behind the scenes, and I said, stop, we do this on stage now. Susan is a brilliant and influential philosopher. She was teaching philosophy in Yale and Tel Aviv, and is for many years now the director of the Einstein Forum in Potsdam, which I have experienced as one of the really few think tanks in Germany with a truly international and therefore wide grip and approach to many, many subjects. Two her books, among her books are Evil in Modern Thought, that Yassin is already very much interested in, Why Grow Up, and the last book just came out recently is Left is Not Woke. I will start, and both of them are members of PEN Berlin, which we're very proud of. So Yassin, 13 million people who had to flee from your country, more than 500,000 murdered, killed. This all is going on now for 12 years. But there's very little knowledge in Germany about Syria and not very much interest. As I said, it's just this problem down there that causes trouble and causes refugees. You once said in an interview it's a complicated country and a complicated conflict. But it's actually not that complicated, so people should get interested into it. Could you please entangle it a bit for us?
Thank you, Eva, and thank you for the organizers, for the people behind this event. So, allow me first to say something about a word that you mentioned. I am here in Berlin to compare our struggle to other struggles. It is not about comparison, actually. It is about putting Syria in a broader perspective.
Yeah.
And this corresponds very well to the fact that we are scattered everywhere in the world. You mentioned 13 million. Well, 13 million displaced internally and externally. Actually, 7 million are scattered in 127 countries. We are bigger than any big empire of the past. 2/3 of the nations of the world. This is according to a Human Rights Watch report published early to 22. So less than 2 years ago, maybe we conquered other countries in the meantime. So, and at least 500,000 of people dead, which is more than 1 in 40, 2.5% of the population. At least 130,000 of people disappeared. We don't know about their fates. But I think by focusing on these factual elements about the Syrian tragedy, we tend to forget that it is not only the biggest struggle so far in the century. The country is divided into 4, Syria. So at times I think we are still talking about an inexistent reality. So there are 4 Syrias, there are 5 occupation power in the country. The biggest superpowers, the Americans since September 2014, the Russians since September 2015, and the 3 biggest regional powers, Israel, which occupies Golan Heights since 1967, which is more than 56 years now, and hitting in Syria every now and then. Iran, from the very beginning of the uprising in Syria, and Turkey, which is an occupation power since 2016, so a year after the Russians. We don't have many examples of a small country with 5 big countries in it. I call this liquid imperialism because usually when we talk about imperialism, we think of one center or few centers expanding overseas to continents and to vast areas, seizing resources and controlling hundreds of millions of people. Syria is a small country. It is not as small as Lebanon, but it is quite small, one of the small countries in the Middle East with 23 million as population. And we have the 2 superpowers and the 2 imperial superpowers and 3 sub-imperial powers in the country. Not to mention many sub-state actors related to these powers. I mean, for instance, Hezbollah, for instance, in a way, PKK, Hashd Sha'bi, which is popular mobilization from Iraq, and in its heyday, Sunni Salafi jihadism, its heydays maybe 5-6 years ago, brought its mujahideen from dozens of countries. So we don't know many examples like this. Syria is reduced to a desert. The country has been ruled by the Assad family for 53 years, which is longer than the age of apartheid system in South Africa, longer than GDR, longer than the Soviet bloc in Eastern Europe. And it is still continuing. And the country, as I said, is divided into 4 Syrias, which is still a de facto division, but with time it can become a de jure division. So we get many Syrians. So this is the situation now, and the human suffering is unprecedented. We saw in these 12 years and a half, more than 150 months, the extremes of human suffering. You heard for sure about the chemical massacres, barrel bombs, which is the the genocidal signature of the Syrian regime, because it's invented, actually. It is the invention. It is the originality and the creativity of the Assad regime.
The Assad regime invented barrel
But yes.
bombs?
It is our originality. So
Okay.
it is. Nobody heard about barrel bombs before 2012. By the way, the first time it was barrel bombs were used, it was July 2012. So a year and 4 months after the beginning of the uprising, and up to I guess 2 years ago, there were 75,000 barrel bombs used in the country. And the peculiar thing about them is that they turn human bodies and civilian facilities into shreds. Mm-hmm. So a few years ago, actually, a few friends wrote a statement asking the international community to license chemical weapons and to forbid barrel bombs, because with chemical weapons, bodies remain one piece. It was very black humor, of course, but I mean, it is because just to express our frustration. So it is an unprecedented situation. That's why I call Syria a microcosm, because the world is in Syria, and the Syrians are in the world. So Syria is important for everybody because of this reason. Because not Syria is important only for us Syrians, because this is the only country we have, but it has become important because it is now a microcosm with the world in the country and the Syrians scattered everywhere. It is also important for another thing, and I'll stop here, because Syrians are the least free people in the world. Maybe the Palestinians share this with us. I mean, with colonial powers, I mentioned 5, with state tyranny that has been in the country for 53 years, and it is, by the way, it is not monopoly of power or dictatorship. It is genocidal. It is dynastical. It is a combination of the modern sovereign state with its totalitarian potential and the old sultanic regime that own the countries that they rule. So it is a pernicious mutation of dictatorship. It is not dictatorship. It is like the Nazis were a pernicious mutation of the national sovereign state.
But this is what your book is about the Assad regime and how it treats its own citizen. This is the power game you concentrate on in your book.
Well, my books actually try, not only this, and 3 or 4 other books, I try to build a theoretical model about Syria, because I think that, well, the academic talk about authoritarianism or about dictatorship or these things don't really capture the reality in Syria. So in this book and in other books, I try to build this model. So just 2 sentences, a couple of sentences. So the least free people in the world, which means in a way we are the political proletariat of the world. Like Marcus talked, we know, and Susan knows this very well, more than anybody, that the freedom of proletariat or the liberation of proletariat is a liberation of all humanity. In a way, the liberation of political proletariat is the biggest leap forward on the way of freedom on the international level. So that's why, again, Syria is important.
Moderating is always throwing away structures that you have planned before. I would suggest that I now read a little bit, because that was what we agreed on, that I read the first three pages of his upcoming book, Darstellung des Schrecklichen, and because then you grab the sound and the tone and the language and the atmosphere of his writings that is quite different from how he was responding to my question now. And I really want to say once again thank you to Günter Orth. It's incredibly beautifully translated. It's just perfect German. I wish other translators knew German so well. Yeah, really. You can applaud him when I have read these first three. So this is from Yassin's upcoming book, Darstellung des Schrecklichen, that is supposed to be out in German on November 2nd. Liebe, Folter, Vergewaltigung und Vernichtung. Nichts scheint weiter auseinander zu liegen als Liebe und Folter. Liebe vereint uns mit einer anderen Person und schenkt uns Kraft und Vertrauen, während Folter uns von uns selbst trennt und uns aufs Äußerste schwächt und entblößt. In der Liebe treten wir aus uns selbst heraus in einen Geliebten, der uns ausfüllt. Bei der Folter hingegen dringt ein Feind in uns ein, um uns unseres Innersten zu berauben. Mögen sich Liebe und Folter auch in jeder anderen Hinsicht voneinander unterscheiden, gleichen sie sich doch darin, dass es sich bei beiden um eine Beziehung zwischen zwei Parteien handelt. Und diese Beziehungen haben etwas gemein, was sie beide beleuchtet. Sie heben die Grenzen zwischen den beiden direkten Protagonisten der Beziehung auf. Liebe. In der Liebe geben wir unsere Grenzen auf und erlauben dem geliebten Menschen, sie zu überschreiten und in unsere Welt einzutreten. Seinerseits erlaubt uns auch der Geliebte, seine Grenzen zu überschreiten und in seinen Bereich einzutreten. Gemeint sind nicht nur körperliche Grenzen, sondern auch die Grenzen des persönlichen Raums. Liebe ist die Auflösung beider Arten von Grenzen und das Aufgehen mit dem Geliebten in einem einzigen Wesen, das sich meist auch durch Zusammenleben manifestiert. Doch indem das Trennende zwischen ihnen verschwindet, entsteht zugleich ein Unterschied zwischen den eins gewordenen Liebenden und allen anderen, einschließlich ihrer jeweiligen früheren Familien. Wir waren zwei und sind nun eins, und zugleich lösen wir uns aus unseren zuvor bestehenden Einheiten oder verlassen mit der Liebe gegebenenfalls die zuvor gelebte Einsamkeit. Der Gipfel der Liebe ist das, wovon wir in arabischen Liebesliedern hören, das Verschmelzen, das völlige Verschwinden der Grenzen zwischen zwei Liebenden. Dies beschränkt sich nicht auf die Momente der sexuellen Vereinigung, sondern es bestimmt auch das Zusammenleben von Liebenden über einen langen Zeitraum. In jedem Fall ist die Liebe ein gemeinsames Überschreiten von Grenzen und die wechselseitige Auflösung des Andersseins. Das Verschmelzen ist dabei der Verlust der Selbstbeherrschung und der eigenen Grenzen. Und genau davor haben viele von uns Angst, zumal in einer Zeit, in der einige von uns ihre Grenzen überall mit sich herumtragen, wie Schildkröten ihren Panzer, auch wenn wir heute schnelle Schildkröten sind, sodass die Liebe zugunsten von Beziehungen, die von rationaler Übereinkunft geprägt sind, fast verschwindet. Wir wollen zwar Liebe, aber wir scheuen das Verschmelzen. Folter. Auch in der Folter werden Grenzen aufgehoben. Der Folternde überschreitet die Grenzen des oder der Gefolterten und legt damit Hand an die körperliche Integrität des Opfers. Der Folterer verfolgt den Gefolterten in sein Innerstes, um dieses zu entleeren, zu besetzen und zu zerstören. Die Aufhebung der Grenzen bei der Folter ist ein gewaltsamer Übergriff, der tödlich enden kann. Das Opfer stirbt, wenn es alle seine Grenzen verliert, wenn jede Grenze zwischen ihm und der Welt der Dinge verschwindet. Der Übergriff ist gewalttätig und erfolgt gegen den Willen des Gefolterten, doch niemals ist er wechselseitig. Der oder die Gefolterte ist in der Folterbeziehung, die eine Nichtbeziehung bzw. eine Antibeziehung oder eine Vernichtungsverbindung ist, kein Partner. Der Gefolterte ist in höchstem Maß exponiert. Er ist im Begriff, den Besitz seines Selbst zu verlieren, und sein Körper ist Schauplatz eines Kampfes. Der Gefolterte leistet Widerstand und versucht, seine Grenzen durch Erduldung zu schützen. Er kann kaum glauben, in die unumkehrbare Situation, in der er sich befindet, geraten zu sein. Aber er muss es glauben, um den Kampf als Vereinzelter durchzustehen und von seinem Körper und seinem Inneren so viel zu retten, wie er kann. Er weiß, wenn er nicht standhält, fallen seine Grenzen, verliert er sein Selbst und er wird es womöglich nie wieder finden. In der Liebe verlieren zwei Personen ihr Wesen, um zu einem zu werden. Bei der Folter verliert der Gefolterte sein Wesen und wird einer oder mehreren anderen Personen gegenüber, die gleichsam ihr Wohl an die Zerstörung des Opfers geknüpft haben, rechtlos. Yassin, while reading your text, I thought that your way of writing about torture and violence is very dry and seems distanced and seems to be as less emotional as possible. Cool and dry, very intellectual. Is this a correct impression, or is this a way of how to describe this? What would you say?
I really don't know. I mean, the same thing was said about my book, Angel, which is not available in German. It's available in French and Japanese. So many people observed that I wrote about my own experience, and I committed myself to my experience, and then tell stories about other comrades and friends. It was detached and rather dry, as Eva has just said. So maybe because I try to overcome my emotions and affects, and well, one of my commitments is that I want to address these issues in as much serious way as possible. I don't want to just complain or approach these issues from autobiographical corner. I wanted to participate in the theoretical thought about these issues, but maybe there's something anti-theory in torture and describing these experiences, but this is what I try to do.
Susan is shaking her head.
Yeah, I'm
Please.
shaking my head.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with Eva that often, but I do disagree with you.
I'm here for you to disagree with me.
Yeah, no, I actually, reading your very beautiful reading of those passages, so Yassin has made two pieces of his life a little bit public, and it seemed to me that both in talking about love and talking about torture, I felt that it was, it didn't strike me as dry at all. I felt a sort of suppressed emotion that actually reminded me of one of my intellectual heroes, Jean-Marie, who also uses his own biography as a way to reflect on philosophical questions and does it magnificently. I mean, there is always the worry if you put yourself into a text that it's going to become narcissistic. Mm-hmm. But there are some writers who pull it off. And for me, Amaury is a master of that, but I felt the same thing in those passages. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I feel I belong to this category of the great Jean-Marie and Primo Levi. Mm-hmm. I mean, we, of course, we base our reports, our writings about our personal experiences, but we try to be detached as much as possible. I think this applies in a way, maybe in a more abstract way, to my small book available in German, Freiheit. Mm-hmm. it is sort of my story, but in abstract concepts. It talks about freedom. There's nothing personal about it. I think maybe I use the pronoun I at times here and there, but actually in an indirect way, it is my story because, the subtitle is Home, Jail, Exile, and the World. So it is my trajectory, my journey through these experiences. So I like this. I feel a bit maybe to talk about your personal experience in detail, activate your demons and the traumas. So I prefer maybe this screening of, approaching these experiences from a distance.
Our evening is called Moral Anger or Moral Wrath. What does it mean to the both of you, especially this connection here? Suppressed emotions.
I feel in your reading of those pages, I felt the emotions were just bubbling under the text. You could feel the pain that Yassin has experienced in his life. Both with the loss of his love and with the
being imprisoned,
torture. And so I actually felt it very strongly. I don't know, had I not known those two facts about you, I wonder, but you make them clear in various places. I think it's a really interesting question, the question of moral wrath or moral indignation, because there are various traditions, a Buddhist tradition, but it's not just Buddhists. The idea that if we hold on to anger, we're perpetuating a cycle of violence and cruelty. And Martin Luther King even said something fairly, he didn't talk about suppressing wrath, but he did talk about suppressing hate. And he said, if you hate your oppressors, it will eat you up. You become, you become all the more vulnerable to them if you hate them back. But my trouble with, say, Buddhism, or this view that you shouldn't express wrath, is that I feel like it's not taking evil seriously enough if you don't actually react with fury.
In 2002, I guess, so I was a beginner because I started writing only after jail, actually after 5 years after I was released.
Should we just add this breathtaking details that you were imprisoned when you were 19 years old and got released when you were 35.
Yeah.
So we were 16 years in jail without any, never saw a judge or no verdict, nothing.
Well,
at the end.
Well, I have two big formative experiences that has made me the way I am, which is whether this is good or bad. The first is, of course, my years in jail. I was, as you said, a bit less than 20, and I spent 16 years in jail. I was nobody. I was not that important guy. 20 years. So, very long and crushing. And I despaired a lot there. That's why I became immune to despair, by the way. In a way, it was a vaccination. I was young, I was healthy, I was not the only child for my parents. So, besides, I like to read, and for 13 years and a half out of 16 years, we had books. And so I learned, I learned English there. I read. We didn't have so many books, not in thousands, but hundreds. Maybe the total in 13 years and a half, more than 1,000. Not so many. The second experience, formative experience, and that changes your life, is what happened after the uprising. And I lived in hiding for 2 years in Damascus at the time. Then for months I was on the move here and there in the country. And so the second is the abduction and kidnapping of my wife and my friends, 3 friends, and even before them, my brother. So with these 2 experiences, it's expected, and I am extremely angry, and I am actually. I have to say, I cannot hide it. But at the same time, I don't like angry people, too. Yeah. So in 2002, I started to. I wanted to mention something about this. I wrote an article titled, "I am angry, therefore I am right." And I thought of anger as a strategy to give yourself a sense of righteousness. And I hated this. I don't like the angry people who are, in a way, extorting others to get recognition or to get awards, or I was victim, I'm angry, please take care of me. No, please don't do that, and I don't like this. But I know that this anger is there, and it is actually, in a way, burning, but I have my method, my therapeutic method to overcome it, which is writing, which is
thinking and writing,
which is idea, which is words. So I prefer to think of this event actually as a defense of words, because when words fail, violence prevails, and Syria is a very great example of this. Words have been humiliated and despised and dealt with in a very brutal way, the way people were dealt with brutally. So, and violence was on the rise all the time since the Familie, or since the Ba'ath Party came to power, which is 60 years now, by the way. It is important to mention that 96 of the Syrians are under 60. So almost all of us were born after Ba'ath Party seized power in 1963. So this is the more than 2 generations with words relegated to something cheap, something without any dignity. By defending words, we defend our lives, especially we writers. These are our tools, so it is also self-defense.
But in your case, it makes absolute sense to me that you overcome, or that you deal with your anger in trying to systematically understand the evil that was applied to you. And this is a question that I wanted to ask both of you, especially also Susan. This was one of the ideas why I brought you here, Susan. What is the sense in thinking and analyzing the structures of the evil? Because most people would say, leave me alone, I don't want to experience the evil, I don't want to be evil, so I don't want to think about it. This is the other side of the moon, basically. But for intellectuals, it makes very good sense to do.
Well, not for all intellectuals. So just very briefly, in my book, Evil in Modern Thought, I divide modern Western philosophy into 2 bits, rather than dividing it as people standardly do into empiricists and rationalists. I exactly divide them into people who think it's crucial to understand evil and people who think it's immoral to try to understand evil. And it may work for other eras and places in philosophy. That's just modern Western philosophy is the part that I know best. It works, I think, very well. It's more explanatory of what philosophers were trying to do as a whole than talking about theories of knowledge and empiricism and rationalism, because it shows what really moves us in trying to make sense of the world. I mean, if we did live in the best of all possible worlds, we would never have a reason to ask why about anything, okay? So it's only because we don't live in the worst of all possible worlds either. Pace Schopenhauer, who argued that we did. But it's precisely it's the mixture of good and evil in the world that leads us to ask questions at all. And if you look at the history of philosophy that way, you find some people, you put people in really strange bedfellows. So I put Leibniz together with Marx, which is really quite crazy, and they both would have objected to it. Mm-hmm. But I think it works because both of them thought that the only way to get rid of evil is to explain it, that you have to understand it. Now, what Leibniz does is try to explain it away, and what Marx does is to say, here it is, and these are the actions that you have to take. But if you look at some other people in the history of philosophy, and Amaury is actually one of them, but so are some other strange people like Voltaire, and certainly Hume and Schopenhauer, who think there's this, excuse my French, which is not very good, s'expliquer n'est pas se justifier, to explain is not to justify, and there's another version of that that phrase, and it's interesting that it's always said in French, and it's always said in the negative. To understand is not to justify. But why would you be so defensive about that if you weren't worried that to understand really is to justify, okay? And it sometimes looks like that. If you look at, if you actually explain the workings of evil, it can get very close to explaining it away. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I came down with on the book, and Amaury and Arendt are in modern day terms, absolute opposites. Yeah. Amaury thinks it's immoral to try to understand, and Arendt thinks it's our only hope. And of getting rid of evil is to try to understand it. So I guess what I wound up concluding for myself is I fall on the Arendt side of the picture, but I think it's always good to remember the other one because, and you talk about this in some of your work, and maybe we'll get to that later, I really worry about the oversaturation of images of evil, of stories about evil. I worry that we're being inured to it. I worry that we're becoming cavalier or even, not caring. So it's a balance, it seems to me. But if pushed to the wall, I would say I come down with Arendt because not understanding leaves us pretty helpless.
I will choose the same, actually. And this is what I a bit don't like of Amaury. He's extremely angry. I mean, it is understandable, of course. You cannot blame someone who was extremely savagely tortured. And he was a sensitive person. He was quite young. I guess he was 24 when he was Susan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a crushing experience. But I have to say that I don't share he's very the world is in a bad situation, but I will not withdraw my trust of the world because I was dealt very badly with the world. I mean, will not improve the world a bit. You know better. Yeah. You are a specialist in Amaury, and
not really, but he's just one of my heroes. No, but I do want to say something about Amaury. Yes, he's angry in what's it called in English? Jenseits von Schuld und Sühne. The first book, the 6 essays, the ones that you're talking about, the torture in Auschwitz. At the mind's limits, it's called in English. Exactly. And what a lot of people don't know are his later essays in which he defends the Enlightenment. And so what I have always loved about Amaury was this combination, that he could write the darkest essays that anybody in the 20th century ever wrote, but also in this other key, actually gives some intellectual foundations for being hopeful. But I'll stop advertising for Amarie.
So, actually, I am ambivalent about the issue of evil. I've been thinking about Syria. On one level, you have arts of torture. This expression is there in Arabic. I guess I'm not sure if it is there in English. فنون التعذيب, arts of torture.
Arts of torture.
Invention, creativity in torturing people and hurting people. And I see this as something that contradicts the idea of banality of evil, where we are talking about bureaucratized, industrialized, mechanized torture, or mechanized bad treatment, or brutalizing people. In some of my work, rather recent, I pose a question whether evil is essential or contingent. I mean, is evil something done by evil people, or people do something bad and they become evil? You commit a crime and you commit another crime and you become evil. So we are not born evil or good, however. Hannah Arendt says that we are not born free, but we are not born slaves as well. So we are not born evil and we are not born good as well. So why this is important? Because if evil is essential, evil is the action of evil people, killing them and exterminating them is the right solution. And we should find their category. I mean, who are the evil ones? Are they the Jews, as it was, the black, the Muslims, the Arabs, the yellow people, the Russians? If evil can be defined by the race or nation or religion or color or whatever, then the right thing to do is to exterminate these people. If evil is contingent, is something that can happen, but it is important for the theory of forgiveness. Evil cannot be forgiven if it is essential. Forgiveness is based on the possibility of separating the action from the person. We forgive persons, we don't forgive actions. I mean, when someone kills people or tortures them, these actions cannot be forgiven. But if this person apologizes and help in dismantling the machine of torture or death or whatever, he can be, or she can be, it is mostly he, can be forgiven. And this tells us that in this case, evil is not essential. Forgiveness is based on the idea of that evil is not essential. Evil is not something that evil people do.
That evil can be learned, as you describe in your book.
Actually,
when you're talking about the
process,
torturers, that they start torturing and they start...
It's a matter of initiation. There are many reports of torturers who throw up or who are shocked when they forced for the first time to torture people. Then some of them became very, very good at torturing people. They became experts in destroying
You go that far that you describe them as ardent lovers of their work, that they are proud of,
Many of them are like
that many of them...
That's why I am a bit hesitant about the banality of evil.
Exactly.
Because banality of evil, and my
Banality
impression
of evil
is
talks about
more bureaucratized practices of evil, and less bureaucratized, like Syria. I
Susan.
am a bit hesitant about it.
I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking and writing about Arendt's book, and I basically come down on the idea that about 98% of the time evil is committed in very banal ways, and that the 2% that if we could deal with the 98%, we'd all be fine, and there could be a couple of really demonic people who love torturing people, sadists of various kinds, but I really, and I of course agree with you, evil is not an essential property of any particular tribe of people. But I was interested in what you were saying about forgiveness, because I started thinking about that, and it turns out, as Bettina Stangnet showed us, that although Eichmann didn't actually like getting his hands dirty with torturing and killing people, and apparently the one time he watched people being gassed, it made him sick, okay? But it turns out that the one thing he regretted was not having killed all the Jews in Europe. It turns out that he had a very worked out theory of why Jews should be killed, and it wasn't even that he was he essentialized Jews in a certain way, but not in a stupid way. He saw Jews as being representative of a cosmopolitan internationalist worldview that was absolutely opposed to the nationalist fascism that he supported, and that's why we had to be wiped out. So I mean, the question is, I do think Bettina Stangnet showed he was not banal at all. And then, of course, there's a question about whether one thinks he should have been executed, which I guess I do, and even Arendt thinks that he should have. But there's another kind of, I was thinking about forgiveness. I went to, last night, I was at presentation of Daniel Kehlmann's new novel. Now, Eva's read the whole novel, and I haven't, so, but he read two passages that I thought were absolutely brilliant about the banality of evil. And he's talking about someone who is a Mitläufer in German, a fellow traveler for the Nazis. Started out as not a communist, but very communist sympathetic, and then wound up working for the Nazis. And he has some terrific passages describing how Goebbels, imagining how Goebbels got this man, manipulated him in certain ways, and he was just simply too weak to say no. And you see beautifully how 98% of the German population in the years from 33 to 45, that is sort of, it's a very good description of that. And then I wonder, it is banal. It's all about being afraid to say no. It's all about not wanting to rock the boat. It's all about wanting to continue with your life.
Does this apply to the leaders, Susan?
No, it does not.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. But the question is, could I really forgive them? I think it doesn't apply to the leaders. But the question is, could I really forgive them? And I'm not sure that I can. I'm not saying they should all be killed, but I'm not sure that I can forgive this. I can understand this kind of banal, okay, I'll go along, well, he's telling me, I'm not sure I could forgive it. What did you think?
I guess there are crimes that are unforgivable. Mm-hmm. If one commits a crime, maybe he's or she's forgivable. If two crimes, it is okay. But when there is a system of crime like the Nazis or like the Assad Syria, it becomes part of the nature of the, as we said about torturers, it becomes part of them. So they are unforgivable because it is no longer, the relation between them and their crime is no longer contingent, is no longer, they cannot apologize. If any of us would commit a crime and apologize, it's okay. This erases one's crimes. But when one is part of this machine of dehumanization, this cannot be forgivable. Actually, I'm thinking of this about Bashar al-Assad. Is he forgivable? He, like Eichmann, most probably he didn't kill anybody with his hands. Maybe he didn't hit any single person. But he's leading a machine of killing and destruction and torture and dehumanization for 23 years now, and for 12 years and a half after the uprising. So, yeah, I think this is irreversible. This cannot be, you know, that Arendt said that the past is irreversible. What happened in the past is irreversible, but we can forgive. Well, this is not anything in the past. This is a system. This is a structure.
I'm going to ask something that may provoke some people here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I mean, I agree with you so far, but I want to go a step further. A nation of Germans who basically, I mean, with, let's say, 2%, maybe it was 10%, unlikely from what we know, who actually actively, in some way, shape, or form, opposed the Nazis. Most did not. Most went along in this, well, it's the easiest thing to do. I heard the most incredible thing when I was in Vienna last week. Maybe you know this, Eva, that what was said during the Nazi period to stop people from, doing anything, any form of, even a small form of resistance was sei doch vernünftig.
This to me sounds very Viennese, yeah.
Which just blew me away. Be reasonable. Be reasonable. I mean,
stay in line.
Yeah, but that be reasonable meant go along with the system and don't open your mouth. It really freaked me out, just because I have a very different conception of reason. And it also made me understand, I don't know, does anybody know whether this was said inside Germany as well as in Austria? Okay. All right, well then now I understand way better. This is, I've been living in this country longer than anywhere I've ever lived, but sometimes one has, these flashes of insight. This explains to me some of the rage of many Germans of the 68 generation, the rage against reason, okay? The anger at Vernunft. But okay,
I'd like to summarize a bit what both of you just said, coming back to the 98% and the 2%.
Can I finish?
I mean, if we...
Sorry? Can I just finish as one more sentence? Sorry, no, I was going on a bit. But let's say that, 97% of the people were reasonable in this sense. They didn't open their mouths. They didn't do anything. Without them, Eichmann and Goebbels and all of those people would have been completely unable to do what they did. Okay? After the war, in a very, very half-hearted way, for about 40 years, they sort of said they were sorry. I mean, you're talking about saying they were sorry. They didn't really say they were sorry, but they performed certain rituals of penance. And then, starting basically in the last few decades, they've been really saying they're sorry. Like, I'm really... But then the question is, or perhaps it's their children, would you forgive them?
Well,
even if they didn't get their hands bloody?
It is up to when they said sorry. While they are in power, I think I would forgive them. After they were toppled from power, of course not, because it is now you are weak. You can no longer hurt people, and you are not honest in saying I'm sorry. Yeah.
I would like to go back a bit to Yassin's book and the question of torture. I mean, what he's trying in the first 50 pages or so is to systematize the different ways and types of torture and how they work inside the system. So this is something much more violent than we're talking about Mitläufer in the Nazi Zeit right now. So I would try to draw your attention to the question of terror as a weapon, terror and torture as a weapon. As I understand, it works in Syria. When, as Yassin just said, you can make people into torturers. You kind of learn. You teach them how to do it, and you figure out that some are not good in it. You have to sort them out, but you stick with those who are very talented and gifted in torturing people on a regular basis every day. They go to work as torturers. So, and if you establish such a system, just a side remark, this is the next step, and then you leave the banality of the evil because somebody is making this system and ruling this system and putting these people into power here and there and this prison and that prison. So then I would like to. I think this is something much stronger and much more. How do you say? It works better if you have a huge system of people who love to torture every day. Then you terrorize a population in a way that you cannot call them anymore Mitläufer, fellow travelers. I think at least for his description of Syria, this seems to me reasonable. This perspective.
Is it really the case that people are simply terrified that if they say a word, they will, like you, wind up being tortured in prison for 16 years?
Apparently it's a random system.
There was a factory of submission and a fear, of instilling fear, which is the essence of the Assad rule in Syria. That factory was called Tadmur prison, or Palmyra prison. And this place, between 1980 and 2000, people were tortured on a daily basis. Maybe 15,000 were executed, or either killed under torture or by torture, because killing is not always under torture. It happened by accident that people know. Torture can be a method of killing, but many of them were executed. Musat Lasda, our previous defense minister, said that he was signing, in Der Spiegel, by the way, an interview a few years ago, I guess it can be digged out, this interview, he said that he was signing 150 executions a week in 1980s. So I spent only 1 year there, fortunately. It was horrible. It was, I wouldn't say it was worse than my previous 15 years, but it was quite shocking, crushing, and yeah, you feel that you fell in a deep well in a desert. Yeah, exactly. Despair and fear. And so it was this school or this factory to instill fear in the whole population of Syrian. It took a whole generation. It took 30 years between 1980s to 2011 for Syrians, for a new generation to come, who forgot the reflexes of that era for an uprising. There's a logic. This generational thing about Syria has a big generational struggle every generation because there are accumulated, undealt with, unaddressed problems. So it took 30 years before a new uprising, and it's coming. I don't know when. Now, of course, it is far more tragic, far more big and huge. It was, the victims were tens of thousands in early 1980s. Now it is in hundreds of thousands, and the division of the country and everything. So, yeah, but it's
You
coming
say
for sure.
a new uprising is coming? Can you?
Yeah. This is
From what groups? From what forces?
From the ones who, from the people who are now maybe very young, or
Like in Iran?
so it will take a generation. Well, I cannot say actually. I cannot predict because my theory doesn't have any predictable. It doesn't help in prediction because what has happened in Syria in the last 150 months is huge, is very big. There's a spiritual, cultural, demographic, geographic, political, existential crisis in the country. So I cannot say that a new uprising will come in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, but a new crisis, a very big explosion, social explosion will come for sure. And actually, there's a sort of a small localized uprising now in Sweden, in part southern Syria, which is very interesting, very radical, very beautiful actually. It gives hope to so many of us. The regime cannot yet barrel bomb them because they belong to a minority, and all the legitimacy of the regime is based on protecting minorities.
So I think we could discuss another hour. At least I would have enough questions to ask, but we said that we would also open up to the audience and make it possible for you. So I already see Ben, where's the microphone? Ben Zachariah and the...
So I wanted briefly to come out of the abstraction and wondered if anybody remembered what used to be called extraordinary rendition, the flights that came out of the United States, passed through Germany and were sent to Syria with people that the Syrian regime would torture on behalf of the United States. And I'm wondering whether this is not a way to put faces to the abstraction that we're talking about now.
Yes, it is actually in Yassin's book.
Can I answer
but yeah,
this
sure,
now?
please.
Well, this is one phase of it. Maher Arar, known as Syrian, a Canadian of Syrian origin, he was in a certain airport in the U.S. and the Americans sent him to the Syrian regime because the regime has great reputation as a torture state. Syria essentially as a torture state. John Amery said this about the Nazis. I think extermination is the essence of National Socialism. Torture is the essence of the Assad regime. And he was tortured heavily. Then, because he has good friends and family, they were active in Canada and the U.S., and it seems that the accusation was extremely false, groundless. So he was released. But this is another story. The black sites after the war on terror, there are many black sites in Djibouti, for instance, in Syria itself. In Poland, I read some reports about, and of course Guantanamo is the main thing. In a way, the war on terror, and Syria, by the way, has been perceived through the lens of war terror since 2013. And the Syrian regime that was accused of being supporter of terror in the 1990s and the first decade of the century is the most enthusiastic party now in this war on terror because terror is diagnosed globally as the fundamental political evil. So not genocide, not occupation, not colonialism, it is torture. It is terrorism. And when you say terrorism, it's okay to do whatever. So it is the justification for genocides. And it works. It has been working very well for the regime. So yeah, things are related very well, actually. The extraditions from America and Britain, by the way. Britain is even more sinister on this level. They submitted many people to the Americans or to other states because they are well known of being torturers. Thank you for the question.
There was a question in the first row here.
Thank you. Thank you, Yassin. Thank you, Susan. First of all, I focus about the evil. I think there's many angle and many level to see the concept of evil. If you remember, Yassin, I criticized your article, and my article, which is called Hannah Arendt in Damascus, and because you, in your article, you kind of essentialize evil, in my opinion was. I think we can see this from many different angles because even you can bring it back even to Freud, this drive of destruction or death and drive of, and second is the, or most important thing that lots of people, I would stay stuck with Arendt concept. Why? Because most of horrible evil and the most hidden evil came from the people who think this is the good thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about, just if you dehumanize people, if you just demonize them, so it's, and you think that you are good, and you can apply this everywhere. And second thing, or second level of the concept, I think evil, good and evil is related to morality. And this both related to religion. We can extend the religion in a way to I think we have to get rid of this both to bring Spinoza concept of ethics, not good and evil. Why? Sorry, because it's just, I want to say this and I finish.
Question.
Yeah. Okay.
No question, it was a comment.
It was a comment about
Okay.
how they spoke about evil. That, yeah, just maybe a little bit of poison is strengthening you. This is ethics, and too much food is killing you. So just we have to think in many different ways to see the concept. Thank you.
Can I answer that quickly?
Mm-hmm,
I'll,
sure.
I'll really try and restrict myself to something very quickly, but it's a question I've thought about a lot, because most people do think that evil is a religious concept, and that if we simply got rid of religion, we would get rid of, and there's a problem with these concepts. It's really not true. It's the other way around. The first category, and it's something that small children come up with when they say something isn't fair. I mean, it may seem to us to be very trivial. Small children don't come up with concepts of religion. They come, but I'm saying religion. It's you don't get rid of it by getting rid of religion. Children experience injustice, okay, and we all go on to think about it in various ways. Religion is one way of dealing with the problem of evil, but it's not the thing that comes first.
I don't care, but you essentialize evil, good and evil.
No, I don't. No.
I agree fully with Susan, and I don't agree
That's
that
good,
I essentialize or Susan essentialize.
Yeah,
And-
I think
and
it has been made
Are you
clear.
serious that we don't have ideas about evil and good if it were not for religion? Sorry. This is, yeah. I mean, maybe our problem with religion, many religions, and one of them now, Islam, is that the more religion doesn't mean more morality, more ethicality, more justice. Because they are two separate levels. Kant is, they think here, the Western philosophy, that Kant was the great philosopher who based religion on ethics. And something similar is needed in the case of Islam. This is out of our...
So let's take another question because time is running short.
Hi. I wanted to first just mention the barrels that the regime invented in Syria,
The
al-Baramil.
barrel bombs.
Yeah.
Genau. They got the Israelis got inspired, and they are using them now in Gaza. And for this sei vernünftig, actually, I since I arrived to Germany and mostly the last 2 years, I have this experience or living this in terms of being supportive of decolonizing Palestine. And especially now, you are hearing this in the German context as sei vernünftig, be with the side with the, how to say, the right side of the history. And it's, and somehow you were mentioning if you can forgive the Germans for what they did. From my perspective and my opinion and my struggle as someone who was born in Syria and faced so brutally my family as well, the whole oppression of the regime, as a supporter of decolonizing Palestine, you are here and somehow, or I would say it differently, I cannot forgive the people who are doing the same for the Palestinians since at least 75 years. And in this sense, if or I, or whatever can, or the Jews, or the Roma, or the communists, or all the people that have been killed back then, they can forgive the Germans for what they did. I think the Palestinians, they cannot. And not just the Palestinians, the whole region there, because it's not just about Palestine.
Okay.
I think we got it.
We did think that this question might come up this evening, and what you probably don't know is that both Eva and I are Jewish, and we have taken quite a lot of abuse over the last 3 years for arguing that Germany needs to pay more attention to the occupation and the injustice, okay? So, you know, there's certainly a sense in which both of us are deeply sympathetic. We've both written about it. We've both thought about it. I actually do know Palestinians, and more than a few, who are perfectly willing to forgive. We don't know what's going to happen now. We are in uncharted territory in the last 72 hours. I don't know a single person who's willing to make any predictions. I think there's a distinction between apartheid, and I use the word apartheid. It's two systems of law for two different peoples. I think there's no question. But I think that Israel, at least in the occupied territories, is an apartheid state. Howsoever, I think the settler colonialism narrative leaves out too much history and makes too many analogies in the wrong direction, okay? That's maybe all I say. Maybe Eva has something else to say. I don't know how Yassin would react. What we have seen of terror in the last 3 days, even if the rage is understandable, and I know many, many Israelis who are right now enraged at the government, at the Israeli government, because without this particular government, I mean, it's been getting worse and worse, but without this particular government, this never would have happened. But I don't think that any of that justifies the kind of terrorism we've just been watching.
Yeah.
I said something about defense. I'd like to think of this as an effort to defend words. And what I am afraid of now in the last 4 days, I was like everybody stuck to my screens. Not TV, I don't have TV, but my mobile phone and my computer to follow news, is the destruction of words. Is that so many people are unable to think from the perspective of the other. And this is also an Arendtian idea, that thoughtlessness which is the basis of evil, of the banal evil, is to fail to think from the other's perspective. I'm afraid, to be honest, that many Europeans are showing this failure, and Americans. But maybe there are two things that prevent people from thinking from the other's perspective. In our part of the world, that over there, victimhood narratives. So I am a victim, everything I do is right. No, when you are a victim, not everything is right. Victimhood is the worst school for justice. And we know this. There are many subaltern genocides in history. And of course, Israel is a very curious mixture of victimhood and supremacy. Because the other thing that prevents you from thinking from the other's perspective is supremacy. Who are those inferiors, those Untermensch? Yeah. Who are those subhumans that I identify with and I think from their perspective? So I'm afraid this is destroying our ability to identify with each other and to understand. And I see this prosperous now in everywhere, actually, everywhere in our part of the world because of the victimhood and here because of the supremacy. I will not.
I just can't help but underlining, Yassin, I've actually been working on a book on victims and heroes and the crazy tendencies that we've come into in the last, I would say, 75 years about the view that, the victim gets to, that your entire legitimacy is determined by your, how much of a victim you are or were, or your family was, or your great-grandparents were. So I think you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you said that.
Then I would, if there are no more questions, I would close this event with the last remark from my side that going back to the abstract that was criticized a bit before, that thinking about the evil also includes the necessity to think about forgiveness and oblivion. Otherwise, we won't get any further, and things would only get worse, as we could see. Now, I thank you very much for...
Can I throw something?
Sure, add something.
Can I throw something in?
Destroy my finishing sentences. No, go ahead, Susan, please.
So what I've been doing when I'm not looking at the screen to see the latest news, I've found myself watching various versions of an Israeli song that somebody here may know called Shir LaShalom. And it's actually an older song than I knew, which completely has changed my understanding. Song of Peace, it's called. But it was actually written in 1969, after the Six-Day War. And it's a kind of chilling song. The melody is very beautiful. But what's chilling about it is it's written in the voices of dead soldiers saying, the sun can rise, but it's not going to wake us up. We are dead. We're in the dark. Your prayers won't help us. Your valorization, heroization of us will not help us. The only thing that will help is to forget us and think about peace. You said oblivion, and I had to think of that because in the context it just seemed absolutely right.
And also,
Sure.
So when words fail, and they are failing miserably now, the way is open to genocide. And I'm afraid this is already happening, actually. This is already happening. And I don't see that there are wise people, wise politicians, trying to say enough is enough. We need justice. This cannot go. It is not about what happened in the last 4 days. It has been going for decades. And it has been destructive for millions of people. Actually, it has been destructive for the whole world. If we think of that we had seen at least one big war since the end of the Second World War in the Middle East. This is the price that we've been paying. So it is about justice. It is about international law, by the way. I mean, many Palestinians are not very happy with international law, but who are treading on the international law, actually, the Israelis, and supported by the US administration and many Europeans. Unfortunately, this is not wise, and we'll pay, all of us will pay heavily for it. We are already paying.
This is a dark note we are ending on. I would like to remind the audience that Yassin's book will be out soon on 2nd of November. Go and have a look and buy your book in this beautiful German by Günter Orts. And I thank you both very much for this evening and for this very interesting and mind-racking conversation and discussion. And
Thank you very much.
hope to see you next time soon, and have a good night. Thank you.